They told the world Jasper Hughes burned to ashes 3 years ago. They lied. He was chained deep inside St. Jude's Asylum, hidden by a corrupt family. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They underestimated a grieving alpha. What follows is a true descent into madness, blood, and absolute devotion. To the public, Dominic Reyes was the picture of a tragic billionaire. He was a ruthless alpha who had built a real estate empire from the ground up, only to lose his fated mate in a devastating house fire just weeks before their bonding ceremony. The press ate up the tragedy. The young, beautiful Omega, Jasper Hughes, consumed by flames while Dominic was away on a business trip. But behind the closed doors of his penthouse, Dominic was rapidly unraveling. The elite society of the city whispered that grief had driven the alpha utterly insane. And perhaps, to the untrained eye, he was. Dominic refused to attend the funeral. He refused to look at the closed casket. He tore his own office apart, shattering glass and mahogany, roaring a single, terrifying truth to anyone who would listen. The bond wasn't broken. In the Omegaverse, the biological reality of a fated poa is undeniable. When an alpha and an omega find their true match, an invisible neurological tether connects them. If one dies, the other feels the severing of that tie, a violent, agonizing psychic amputation that leaves the survivor physically ill. Dominic never felt that snap. He felt an agonizing stretching, a muted, suffocating static. But not death. "He is alive," Dominic would snarl, his eyes bloodshot, his imposing frame shaking with suppressed feral energy. His scent, usually a sharp, commanding blend of petrichor and dark cedar, had turned bitter, acidic with constant distress. Jasper's family, particularly his uncle, Arthur Hughes, played the role of the sympathetic relatives. They hired the city's top psychiatrists to treat Dominic's delusions. They prescribed heavy antipsychotics, gaslighting the alpha into believing that the trauma had simply broken his mind. For 3 years, Dominic lived in a chemical haze, his primal instincts muffled by medication. He walked through life like a ghost, haunting his own empire, constantly haunted by the faint, phantom scent of vanilla and white peach. The turning point happened on a freezing Tuesday in November. Dominic had stopped taking his pills 2 weeks prior. His mind was clearing, and the feral, protective alpha instincts were returning with terrifying force. He was sitting in his darkened study when his private server received an encrypted email. There was no subject line, just a single, grainy photograph and an audio file. Dominic clicked the image. His heart stopped. It was a still from a security camera, time-stamped just 3 days ago. The room was bleak, made of padded walls and harsh fluorescent lights. Huddled in the corner was a figure in a restrictive medical gown. The boy was gaunt, his hair overgrown and matted, his eyes vacant. But there, resting just above the collar of the rough fabric, was a crescent-shaped birthmark. Jasper. Dominic's lungs seized. His hands trembled as he clicked the audio file. A woman's voice, hushed and terrified, filled the quiet study. "Mr. Reyes, my name is Beatrice Miller. I was a night nurse at St. Jude's Psychiatric Institute. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. They didn't bury Jasper Hughes. His uncle Arthur faked the dental records. He locked Jasper away to gain control of his trust fund and to stop your merger. They have him on heavy scent suppressants and neuro blockers. He's in the sub-basement. If you don't come soon, Dr. Caldwell is planning a permanent lobotomy to erase the mate bond completely. Please." He cries your name when the drugs wear off. A sound ripped from Dominic's throat, a raw, guttural roar of an alpha, realizing his mate was not only alive, but actively being tortured. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, terrifying the security detail outside his door. The facade of the civilized billionaire shattered in an instant. The insane alpha the media had mocked was gone. In his place was an apex predator, stripped of all humanity, fueled by 3 years of suppressed rage and agonizing separation. He didn't call the police. The police were in Arthur Hughes's pocket. The law had signed Jasper's fake death certificate. The law was useless. Dominic picked up his phone and dialed his head of private security. Jackson. "Arm everyone." Dominic's voice was deadly quiet, a chilling contrast to the raging tempest of his scent. "We are going to St. Jude's, and Jackson, shoot anyone who stands in the doorway." St. Jude's Psychiatric Institute sat like a concrete fortress at the edge of the city limits, isolated by miles of dense, unforgiving pine forest. It catered to the ultra-wealthy, a place where inconvenient family members were locked away to disappear. It was a citadel of secrets, protected by high electrified fences, private armed guards, and layers of bureaucratic red tape. Dominic didn't bother with the front gate intercom. At exactly 2 a.m., a convoy of 5 armored black SUVs tore up the winding mountain road, their headlights cutting through the heavy, freezing rain. The lead vehicle, driven by Dominic himself, accelerated as it approached the reinforced steel gates. He braced for impact. The heavy SUV slammed into the barrier, tearing the hinges apart with a deafening screech of metal. Alarms immediately began to blare, painting the rain-slicked courtyard in flashing red lights. Armed guards rushed out of the guardhouse, raising their weapons, but they were instantly blinded by the high beams of the remaining vehicles. Dominic stepped out into the pouring rain. He didn't carry a firearm. He didn't need to. He unleashed his pheromones. For an alpha of Dominic's lineage, pheromones weren't just a scent. They were a biological weapon. A suffocating, crushing wave of pure, aggressive dominance rolled across the courtyard. The guards, mostly betas and lower-tier alphas, physically buckled. Several dropped their weapons, falling to their knees, clutching their chests as their biology forced them into submission against the apex predator in their midst. Jackson and Dominic's tactical team moved with lethal efficiency, disarming the incapacitated guards and securing the perimeter. Dominic walked past them, his eyes locked on the heavy glass doors of the main entrance. He shattered them with a single swing of a steel baton he'd pulled from his trunk. Inside, the hospital was a chaotic nightmare of blaring sirens and panicked staff. Dominic stalked down the sterile white hallways, a dark vengeance moving through the pristine environment. The scent of antiseptic, bleach, and fear assaulted his nose, but he was searching for one thing: vanilla and white peach. "Dr. Caldwell," Dominic's voice boomed, rattling the medical carts. From the end of the corridor, a tall, graying beta in a lab coat froze, flanked by 2 burly orderlies. Dr. Elliot Caldwell's face drained of color as he recognized the billionaire. "Mr. Reyes, you are trespassing. I have already called the authorities." Dominic closed the distance with terrifying speed. Before the orderlies could react, Jackson's team had them pinned to the floor. Dominic grabbed Dr. Caldwell by the throat of his expensive lab coat, slamming the doctor backward against the cinder block wall. The impact knocked the wind out of the man. "Sub-basement," Dominic growled, his voice vibrating with a monstrous, inhuman frequency. "Room number, now!" "You don't understand," Caldwell wheezed, his eyes wide with terror. "He is legally under our care." He is highly unstable. Dominic's grip tightened, lifting the doctor an inch off the floor. He is my mate, and if you don't tell me exactly where he is in the next 3 seconds, I will tear your throat out with my bare teeth. 409, Caldwell choked out, pointing desperately toward the restricted elevator banks. Sub-basement 4, room 409. The codes are on my badge. Dominic ripped the security badge from Caldwell's neck, dropping the doctor to the floor like discarded trash. Keep him alive, Dominic ordered Jackson. I want him conscious when I burn this place to the ground. Dominic moved to the elevators, swiping the stolen badge. The descent felt like an eternity. With every floor the elevator dropped, the temperature seemed to plummet, and the horrific reality of the asylum began to reveal itself. The sub-basements weren't medical floors, they were dungeons. The elevator doors pinged open to sub-basement 4. The hallway was dimly lit, reeking of damp concrete, harsh chemicals, and the unmistakable sour smell of Omega distress. It was a scent that made Dominic's blood boil. He moved down the corridor, checking the heavy iron doors. 405, 407, 409. There were no handles on the outside of 409, only a heavy electronic deadbolt and a small sliding viewing window. Dominic swiped the badge. A red light flashed. Access denied. Caldwell's badge didn't have top-tier clearance for this specific cell. Dominic didn't hesitate. He stepped back, raised his booted foot, and kicked the heavy door right next to the electronic lock. Once. Twice more. The metal groaned. The third kick, fueled by pure, unadulterated adrenaline and alpha rage, shattered the locking mechanism. The door swung open. Hitting the inner wall with a loud bang, Dominic stepped inside. The room was freezing. There was no bed, just a thin mattress on the floor. Huddled in the farthest corner, shivering violently, was Jasper. He was incredibly frail, swimming in a straitjacket that bound his arms tightly to his chest. His beautiful golden hair was dull and matted, hiding his face. The heavy scent suppressants the hospital pumped into the vents almost masked him entirely. But underneath the chemical bleach, Dominic caught it. The faintest whisper of vanilla and sweet peach. Jasper flinched at the loud noise of the door breaking, pressing himself harder against the padded wall, letting out a soft, broken whimper that shattered Dominic's heart into a million pieces. "No more," Jasper mumbled, his voice raspy and broken from years of disuse and screaming. "Please, no more needles. I'll be good. I'm sorry." Dominic dropped to his knees, ignoring the dirt and the cold. He slowly, carefully released his pheromones, no longer dominant or aggressive, but wrapping the room in a thick, comforting blanket of petrichor and cedar. The scent of home. The scent of safety. "Jasper!" Dominic choked out, tears finally breaking through his hardened eyes for the first time in 3 years. Jasper froze. Slowly, agonizingly, the Omega lifted his head. His eyes, heavily dilated from the neuroblockers, struggled to focus on the large figure in front of him. He blinked, trembling violently, staring at Dominic as if looking at a ghost. On the padded wall behind Jasper, scratched into the leather with what must have been his own fingernails over 3 agonizing years, were 2 letters repeated hundreds of times. D.R. 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 Dominic Reyes. He had held on to his alpha's name to survive the madness. Jasper let out a breathless, heart-breaking sob, leaning forward as far as his bounds would allow. Dominic closed the distance, pulling the fragile, bound Omega into his chest, burying his face into Jasper's neck. He breathed in his mate, feeling the agonizing phantom bond suddenly roar to life, snapping back into place with electric intensity. Dominic's eyes flashed a brilliant, predatory gold in the dim light as he looked back out into the hallway. "Mine," the Alpha snarled into the dark. "He is mine." Dominic did not hesitate. He pulled a matte black tactical blade from his belt, the sharp scrape of metal echoing in the sterile, suffocating room. Jasper flinched, his heavily drugged mind misinterpreting the weapon, curling into a tighter ball and burying his face against his bruised knees. "Shh, my heart. It's just me. It's Dominic," the Alpha murmured, his voice a low, rumbling purr that vibrated with biological command, designed to soothe the distressed Omega. Dominic carefully slid the blade under the thick, reinforced canvas straps of the straitjacket. With 3 precise, powerful pulls, the restrictive garment fell away. Jasper's arms, pale and alarmingly thin, dropped uselessly to his sides, marred by years of intravenous needle marks and deep, mottled bruising. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard his teeth threatened to crack. He shrugged off his heavy cashmere overcoat, wrapping the oversized, cedar-scented wool around Jasper's shivering frame. The moment the coat enveloped him, Jasper grabbed fistfuls of the fabric, burying his nose into the lapel. A ragged, desperate inhale filled his lungs, and the Omega let out a gut-wrenching keen, a sound of pure, unadulterated longing finally meeting reality. He collapsed forward into Dominic's chest, his frail fingers weakly clutching the Alpha's shirt. "I've got you," Dominic whispered, effortlessly lifting Jasper into his arms. The Omega weighed practically nothing. "I am never letting you go again." Dominic turned and stepped out of the cell, holding his mate tight against his heart. Jackson was waiting in the corridor, his tactical rifle lowered but his eyes scanning the shadows. "Sir," Jackson said, his earpiece blinking with a red incoming transmission light. "We have a massive problem upstairs. Local PD just breached the outer perimeter. 6 cruisers, and they aren't alone. Arthur Hughes is with them." Dominic's eyes darkened, the gold bleeding out until his irises were pits of black rage. "Arthur," he repeated, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "He brought the local police? The ones on his payroll?" "Captain Donovan is leading them," Jackson confirmed. "They have the lobby locked down. They're demanding we surrender the building and release Dr. Caldwell, claiming we are enacting a terrorist siege on a medical facility." Dominic let out a dark, humorless laugh that sent a chill down Jackson's spine. He adjusted his grip on Jasper, tucking the Omega's head securely under his chin. "Let them lock down the lobby. It just means Arthur cannot run." The ascent in the freight elevator felt entirely different from the descent. Dominic was no longer searching. He was bringing his world back to the surface. As the heavy metal doors slid open on the ground floor, a chaotic scene greeted them. The pristine, marble-floored lobby of St. Jude's Institute was bathed in the harsh, spinning blue and red lights of the police cruisers outside. 6 armed officers stood behind tactical barricades, their weapons trained on the elevator banks. In the center of the room, looking impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, stood Arthur Hughes. He looked entirely unbothered, a smug, aristocratic sneer playing on his lips. "Dominic, my boy," Arthur called out, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I heard you were having an episode, breaking into a psychiatric facility, assaulting medical professionals. The grief has finally shattered your mind completely. Put the patient down. You are hallucinating." Dominic stepped out of the elevator, his boots heavy against the marble. Jackson and the elite security team fanned out beside him, their weapons raised in a tense standoff with the corrupt police. "I am not hallucinating, Arthur," Dominic said, his voice deadly calm. He shifted the cashmere coat slightly, revealing the pale, terrified face of Jasper Hughes. A murmur rippled through the police line. Even Captain Donovan lowered his weapon a fraction, his eyes widening as he recognized the supposedly cremated heir to the Hughes fortune. Arthur's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. A tragic resemblance. Dr. Caldwell treats many troubled Omegas. You've kidnapped a ward of the state, Dominic. Captain Donovan, arrest this madman and return the patient to his room. He's not going anywhere. A new, sharp voice sliced through the tension. From the shadows of the admission corridor, Beatrice Miller stepped forward. The brave night nurse was clutching a thick, heavy stack of manila folders and a silver encrypted hard drive. But she wasn't alone. Flanking her were 4 men in dark windbreakers, bearing the bright yellow letters, FBI. Special Agent Spencer, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the lead agent announced, flashing a gold badge that made Captain Donovan's face drain of all color. Stand down, Captain. Local jurisdiction is officially superseded. Arthur Hughes took a step back, his eyes darting toward the exit. This is absurd. What federal jurisdiction? Medical fraud, kidnapping, and illegal biological harvesting, Dominic sneered, taking a menacing step toward Arthur. The truth Beatrice had sent him in a follow-up email before the raid had sickened him to his core. Tell them, Arthur. Tell them why you didn't just kill him to get the trust fund. Tell them why you kept him alive. Arthur swallowed hard, his composure cracking. Beatrice held up the hard drive. Jasper Hughes possesses a highly rare omega stem cell mutation, she announced to the silent, stunned lobby. For 3 years, Arthur Hughes and Dr. Caldwell have been painfully extracting his bone marrow and spinal fluid to synthesize illegal experimental anti-aging therapies for the black market elite. They faked his death not just for the money, but to turn him into a proprietary biological factory. The collective gasp from the local police was audible. Even the corrupt officers lowered their guns completely, stepping away from Arthur in disgust. It's a lie, Arthur shouted, his voice pitching into a desperate, panicked squeak. I am a respected pillar of this city. That Omega is legally dead. Dominic handed Jasper gently into the protective arms of Agent Spencer's medical detail, who immediately brought forward a trauma stretcher. Once his mate was secured, Dominic turned his full, terrifying attention back to Arthur. He crossed the lobby in 3 long strides. Captain Donovan didn't even attempt to stop him. Dominic grabbed Arthur by the expensive silk tie, lifting the older man off his feet and slamming him brutally against the granite reception desk. The heavy wood splintered under the impact. He is not dead, Dominic roared, his alpha pheromones exploding outward in a violent, crushing wave of dominance that dropped Arthur to his knees the second Dominic released him. And you are going to spend the rest of your miserable, pathetic life in a federal black site, praying that I never find out which cell is yours. Agent Spencer stepped forward, slapping heavy steel cuffs onto Arthur's trembling wrists. Arthur Hughes, you are under arrest. Dominic didn't stay to watch them read the rights. He turned on his heel, rushing out the shattered front doors into the freezing rain, following the paramedics who were loading his entire world into the back of an armored medical transport. The nightmare of St. Jude's was finally over. The true battle to heal was just beginning. 6 months later, the Reyes estate, nestled high in the secluded, snow-capped mountains outside the city, was a fortress of tranquility. Dominic had fortified the massive property, turning it into a sanctuary where the media, the curious elite, and the ghosts of the past could not reach them. The world had exploded in the wake of the St. Jude's raid. The trial of Arthur Hughes and Dr. Elliot Caldwell was the scandal of the century. The public revelation of the illegal marrow harvesting ring had decimated the Hughes empire, sending shockwaves through high society. Dominic's ruthless legal team dismantled Arthur's defenses piece by piece, ensuring the man received a life sentence with zero possibility of parole. The corrupt local police department was gutted by federal indictments. Dominic had burned their enemies to the ground, salting the earth so nothing would ever threaten them again. But inside the sprawling, glass-walled master bedroom of the estate, none of that mattered. The morning sun filtered through the heavy velvet curtains, casting a warm, golden glow over the massive, king-sized bed. Dominic sat in an oversized leather armchair in the corner, a cup of untouched black coffee in his hands. He watched the bed intently, his heart swelling with a painful, overwhelming love. Jasper was asleep, curled on his side, swimming in one of Dominic's dark grey t-shirts. The physical recovery had been agonizing. Dr. Oliver Stanton, the world's foremost specialist in omega trauma and biology, had practically moved into the estate. The withdrawal from 3 years of heavy neuroblockers had subjected Jasper to weeks of violent seizures, night terrors, and sensory overload. During the darkest nights, Jasper would forget he was safe, screaming for the padded walls, begging for the needles to stop. Through it all, Dominic never left his side. He became Jasper's anchor. He learned to control his massive alpha aura, keeping his scent constantly dialed to a soft, reassuring hum of rain and cedar. He hand-fed Jasper when the Omega was too weak to lift a spoon. He sat in the shower fully clothed, holding Jasper as the hot water washed away phantom blood and invisible stains. Slowly, miracles began to happen. The dullness faded from Jasper's golden hair, replaced by a soft, healthy shine. The hollows of his cheeks filled out, and the scent, the beautiful, intoxicating aroma of vanilla and white peach, returned in full force, blossoming through the estate and driving Dominic Vold with absolute devotion. Jasper stirred under the heavy down comforter. He stretched, a small, contented sigh escaping his lips, before his bright, clear blue eyes fluttered open. He blinked against the morning light, immediately seeking out the dark corner of the room. When his eyes locked onto Dominic, a brilliant, breathtaking smile broke across his face. "You're staring." Jasper's voice was soft, slightly raspy, but laced with a playful warmth that hadn't existed 3 years ago. Dominic set the coffee mug down, crossing the room in silent strides. He sat on the edge of the mattress, reaching out to brush a stray golden curl from Jasper's forehead. "I'm making sure you're real," Dominic answered, his voice thick with emotion. "Every morning, I wake up terrified that I am still in my study, and Beatrice Miller's email never came." Jasper pushed himself up, resting his back against the plush headboard. He reached out, taking Dominic's large, scarred hand in his own, pressing a gentle kiss to the alpha's knuckles. "I'm real," Jasper whispered. He shifted closer, pulling Dominic down so their foreheads rested against each other. "We're real. We survived it." Dominic closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. The bond between them, once a frayed, agonizing thread, was now a roaring, indestructible cable of light and energy. But there was still one thing missing. One final piece to the puzzle that had been violently interrupted 3 years ago. "Jasper," Dominic began, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a deep, primal request. He pulled back slightly, looking into the Omega's eyes. "The world thinks I am a widower. The society still whispers that I am clinging to a ghost. I want to show them. I want to show everyone that you are mine, and I am yours." Jasper's breath hitched. He knew exactly what Dominic was asking. In the Omegaverse, a true bond was not complete until the physical claiming mark was placed. They had been robbed of their bonding ceremony. Jasper had been robbed of his choice, his autonomy, and his life. Jasper's eyes filled with happy, unspilled tears. He didn't hesitate. He tilted his head to the side, exposing the pale, sensitive curve of his neck where the crescent birthmark sat, the exact spot where an alpha's teeth were meant to pierce the scent gland. "Claim me," Jasper breathed, his scent spiking with sudden, overwhelming arousal and absolute trust. The aroma of sweet peach flooded the room, drowning out the lingering shadows of their past. "Make it permanent, Dominic. Bind us." A feral, possessive growl tore its way up Dominic's throat. His eyes flashed a brilliant, radiant gold. The civilized billionaire vanished, leaving only the devoted mate. He leaned in, his lips brushing against the frantically pulsing vein on Jasper's neck. He inhaled the pure essence of his Omega, a scent that tasted like salvation. "Forever," Dominic swore against the delicate skin. He opened his mouth and sank his teeth into the claiming gland. Jasper cried out, a beautiful, shattered sound of pain melting instantly into unparalleled euphoria. The moment the venom mixed with Jasper's bloodstream, a shockwave of pure psychic energy exploded between them. It was a kaleidoscope of emotions. Grief burning away, fear turning to ash, replaced by a blinding, overwhelming tide of absolute love and biological completion. Dominic held him tight, riding out the incredible wave of the bond snapping fully, permanently into place. He licked the small beads of blood from the puncture wounds, soothing the bite with his tongue until the mark began to heal into a perfect permanent scar. When Dominic finally pulled back, both of them were panting, tears streaming down their faces. Jasper touched the fresh mark on his neck, his eyes wide with wonder. He could feel Dominic now, not just physically, but deep within his mind. He could feel the Alpha's unyielding protection, his deep-seated fear of loss, and his all-consuming love. "Mine," Jasper whispered, echoing the words Dominic had spoken in the darkness of the asylum cell. Dominic smiled, a genuine, blinding smile that reached his eyes for the first time in 1,000 days. He pulled Jasper into his lap, wrapping his arms securely around his waist, burying his face in the Omega's golden hair. "Yours," Dominic agreed, "until the stars burn out." Outside the reinforced windows, the winter snow began to melt, giving way to the first bright, undeniable rays of spring. The Alpha who went insane had torn down the world to find his dead mate, and in the ruins of their enemies, they had built a paradise of their own. If you felt the intense rush of Dominic's devotion and Jasper's survival, make sure to hit that like button. Share this insane Omegaverse drama with your friends to see their reactions to these wild plot twists. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling, heartbreaking story. Drop a comment below. What would you do if your fated mate was hidden away? See you in the next video.